Hello and welcome everybody to tonight's Thursday's live stream from Truth Proof. I'm Les from Digital Creations, facilitating everything tonight for Truth Proof. Welcome everybody I can see in the chat to tonight's live stream. Let's hit the road running. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Welcome everybody in tonight's chat room. Welcome to the stream from here in the UK, and welcome everybody around the world. We've got a great guest on tonight. He probably needs no introduction, but Paul will introduce him a little bit later. I'll just do a few name checks on the stream tonight. We've got Nick's Exploration in tonight. Welcome to the show. Nick, Lisa Odd, Ralph Winter, MKMD, yes, COTV, and we've got Steve Lewis, and who else we've got Deborah modding tonight, and Andy if he comes on tonight. So everybody be on their behaviour. No, everybody be nice to each other. That always helps on our live stream. Okay then, without further ado, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from Paul and his guest. I'll hand over to Paul.
Thank you very much, Les, and doing a great job. And thank you, Deborah, for doing the mods in the chat. And it's great to be speaking to Steve Mera. It truly is, because I think we're all in for a treat, because I don't think there's much on the subject of the unexplained and the paranormal that Steve cannot talk about. You know, he'll touch on most things, and he's gone into some really deep research in the sort of time that he's been involved, a long time within the subject. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you, guys. I'm glad to be on.
No, you're welcome. I mean, I think we could start, Steve. I don't think there's anybody really could do a better introduction of Steve Mera than Steve himself. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what makes you tick?
Yeah. Certainly a lot of different things now than they were in the early years. 39 years in on the subject. Started in ufology. First investigation 1983 in Liverpool. And really, I would have one of those big tape recorders, a compass, a pen and a pad, a pair of binoculars. I think that was my kit back in the 1983.
Yeah.
Things have changed. I worked within the field of ufology for quite some time. I joined a few organizations. I created a few organizations. And I exhausted all the knowledge I could probably think of at the time in the subject of UFOs. Apart from adding another photograph or video to the mountains of them that we only had another stone to the mountain we've got. Wasn't really getting any further answers. And so it left there. It didn't advance the subject and hadn't advanced much. So I wanted to get into, obviously, the paranormal, because I realized early on in the subject of ufology that there were a lot of paranormal stuff happening that was being overlooked. And here you go. And it wasn't just me, it goes back years. I mean, if you just look at the Project Blue Book officers, now when they were doing investigations, it was clearly, obviously, just all for show, you know, and by public demand. And this is why Blue Book officers would pick up the phone to reporters and say, you know, we're heading down to Mrs. Jones, who's reported a UFO. We've got to be there about 5 o'clock. Knowing that the reporters are going to be there and filming the Blue Book officers getting out of the car and all that, it makes them look really good. But truth of the matter is, they go in there and they go through a report form with them. And I don't know if you've seen those report forms, but oh my God, it's like 12-year-olds wrote them out, you know?
Yeah.
Half the questions weren't asked. Very little information on there at all. It's just like they didn't really, it was just more for show. But what I did find throughout some of the cases is what people were saying were about some of the paranormal attributes. There are people that have experiences, seen a close object at close quarters, and of course, the tail end of that is that they started to have paranormal disturbances within a 48-hour period in their homes. In some cases, some people reported apparitions of small greyish type beings. And that was a long time before the hypothesis of the little grey alien turned up on our scenes in the 80s. That's a phantom coffee coming in.
Yeah.
You know, so really there's information out there, if you really hunt it down, that shows that the small entities, these greys, or whatever you want to call them, I hate that term, to be honest with you, but they've been around a little bit longer than what we thought initially.
Yeah.
Many people thought, oh God, you know, it's 1961 Betsy and Barney Hill case, but they've been around before that. And when I started looking through these reports, it's as if the Blue Book officers went, do you know what, Mrs. Brown, don't give us all that nitty gritty paranormal ghosty stuff. We just stick to the facts. Where did you see the UFO? And I'm thinking to myself, God, you know, you're just missing it.
The massive trick, yeah.
Massively. And it was totally ignored, because in them days, you know, the ghosty stuff wasn't considered, oh, well, you know, it's a science, or it's part of this phenomena. Because what they did is that back then in the 1940s, they started building these walls. And these walls encompass certain subjects like the paranormal and UFOs and spirituality, you know, and we wasn't using all these, you know, to our advantage, because the UFO guys would only deal with the paranormal guys, and the paranormal guys will deal with the UFO guys. So never the twain will meet, never that extra knowledge is obtained. And that went on for years and years and years. So that's why I kind of got into the paranormal. So I spent 4 or 5 years doing standard research, some investigations. And then I got a call one day from Manchester Public Relations Office, who asked me if I would consider doing a corporate confidential investigation on behalf of the Ministry of Defence. It was one of their buildings, Sunlight House in Deansgate, Manchester, which they had at the time, 14 floors, huge building. And they were having disturbances there, which was causing managerial issues. Staff wouldn't work late. They wouldn't work at certain times. They wouldn't work in certain areas of the building, and it was a problem. It became a significant problem for them. So that was my first corporate investigation. In fact, there was 36 investigators. We all had to be pretend to be electrical engineers, and we had the electrician's belt with the tools in and the yellow hats, and we were walking around. We were doing our surveys on the building, but as far as the staff knew, we were just electrical engineers doing a scope of the building.
Were you also sort of charged with gathering information off the staff as well?
We gathered information off the staff by two different angles, on a personal note and basically an interview process. Because we were dealing for clients like the Ministry of Defence, it was all about them being our clients, how to protect them, so that is not a financial impact upon the company by staff not working in areas or at certain times. How to deal with confidentiality, how the staff need to deal with this matter, and that stretched into. We did the case. It was quite a big case, and I thought that was that. But somehow, what happened is Manchester Public Relations put us on this list, and we started getting calls. And I ended up working 16 and a half years, almost 17 years, constantly doing corporate confidential cases. Now, some of them it went right up the ladder, right through working with the police authorities, working with CID in London, working for the likes of Tesco's, believe it or not, Asda, Woolworths, businesses like inns, hotels, office works, football stadiums, rugby stadiums. Honest to God, it was crazy. Now, these businesses, they didn't want the information out. They don't want problems, but they want to see if it can be controlled and assisted, so that it's not problematic for them. And that's when we started getting involved with the city councils and the tenants, private landlords. And we ended up writing a 58-page protocol, because one of these guys came forward to us. I can't mention the council, but it was one of them that came forward to us and said, look, we've got a tenant who's reporting paranormal phenomena. Tenants have more rights than landlords these days, and she's refusing to pay her rent because there's a clause in there in regards to living conditions. And even though it doesn't say paranormal, they're using that to not have to pay rent. And I said, well, is it consistent? Is it authentic? You know, and they said, well, we don't know. We've been in there, you know. So believe it or not, we had people which were hoaxing stuff to get away from paying rent, or even being relocated just because they don't get along with the neighbours. Made up this story. But how do we protect the clients? Because at the end of the day, they've got a business to run, they've got houses that they have to continue to rent, and they don't want press involved, so there've got to be some confidentiality involved here. So basically, we wrote this protocol up, and they started using us to conduct their investigations for them. So we worked for 60 odd different councils around the country. In fact, the last one was 6 years ago in Stirling, in Scotland, where I met with Stirling Council in regarding and provide them the protocol. And it's a protocol that they're all using now because none of them had anything. They didn't know. This was a situation that occasionally it was happening, but nobody knew how to deal with it, you know? And things were getting out of hand, they were getting bad press and all sorts of different things.
Well, Steve, if you can, give us some examples of some of the cases that you felt were genuine, if that's possible, without going into details of addresses and...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, there was Woolworths in Burnley. Now, it used to be there. It's not there anymore. Absolutely, Woolworths has gone, but on the high street there, the precinct part, there was Woolworths stood there, and the manager contacted us in regarding problems with staff working in certain areas of the building. A number of photographs have been taken with dark shadows on, and in fact, one amazing photograph which was taken on a camera you purchase from a machine, you know, one of those instant cameras that you don't, the film's already in them. So basically, you use them and throw them away. And he didn't have a camera, so he started taking photographs. And on one particular occasion, his area manager, they were opening on Sunday for 4 hours as a trial, and they had this sign made up. So his area manager said to him, I need a photograph of the sign. So he said, oh, well, I'll use this in static camera, you know, one of these little cameras. So he took this photograph, and on the photograph, in reverse, in kind of, it's upside down, but there's a person that seemingly sat on the ceiling, and it's absolutely a person. It's very clear. The person was in some type of hooded jacket, sat there, but it's as if the whole image was upside down and been applied to that photograph. And it was just crazy weird. But they had quite a number of disturbances that went on for some time. Very authentic disturbances.
And that information, did you manage to retain any of those images, or did the client keep the?
No. Well, what happens is when we take on a client, they have to go through one of our CAP documents. It's a confidential. It's a policy, a confidential assurance policy, CAP document, and they have to sign it. Now, that means that any information that we obtain, the details, photographs, videos, everything is kept confidential about everything for 10 years. If it goes beyond the 10 years, then they're supposed to contact us by a certain date to continue it for another 10 years. It says there in the small print at the bottom, which they sign, you know, it says that if they do not get back in touch with us after 10 years, then they're happy for us to release the information. So that particular case, yeah, we released the information, you know, it's... and many others. There's still a few yet to come. There's still quite a few yet which are still waiting to.
And these cases, then, Steve, did they just cover ghostly type, apparition type phenomena, or what other types of phenomena, or did it put it across the board?
Well, there was a number of different things actually. I mean, it really wasn't much problems for businesses in regarding the UFOs. I mean, I went to Angleton regarding it was a 12th century church. It was being renovated. For historic reasons. The graveyard at the side of the church, the contractors, and it was, I can't remember the name of the contractors now, began with C anyway, but the contracting company decided that they weren't going to work on this church because they believed the graveyard, circular navigating the right round the church, was haunted because they kept seeing these strange lights around the graves. So it was down tools. So I was called in there to find out You know, can it be substantiated? Have they got a reason to be down tools? You know, and that sort of thing. I went in there. Turned out to be ignis fatuus. Turned out to be swamp gas. It was right at the back. Is a lot of swampland, and it was during the summer when they were doing the construction, good weather, and it's heating up and it's causing methane and phosphane and all sorts of different things. And what's happening is it's igniting. I actually saw one about a little bit smaller than a tennis ball, and I photographed it. I actually got a proper photograph of ignis fatuus, and I could see it dancing around. And I thought, well, if they're seeing this round near the graveyard, which is right there, then they're going to think it's something paranormal. So anyway, it turned out it was ignis fatuus, and I said, could you not smell the smell? He said, yeah, we used to smell it, but we didn't know it. We didn't make a connection. These guys are just, you know, they didn't know.
But,
Anyway, it was back to work for them.
But that's good, Steve, isn't it? Because, and I don't mean it, I know this is what you like, but it just shows you weren't looking for solely a paranormal UFO related explanation. And that, as researchers, that's what we've got to do, because there's too many people out there that just everything's got to be come round to what they want to believe, kind of thing. Any more cases you want to talk about, Steve? Feel free, or we can move on.
I mean, apart from me doing those cases with the paranormal, not so much UFOs. I got involved in big cats. I worked with the exotic animal register, which was quite secretive at the time. I worked on the case where a young boy got whacked by a large cat in Leicester. There was a big hoo-ha over this. Turned out the boy pulled its tail. It was quite friendly, actually. Yanked its tail and it swiped him. Of course, there was colonists, killer cat and everything all over. So, I mean, my job was to make sure that the protection of the cats, you know, because there's a lot of things unfair going on, people going out with pellet guns and all sorts of things. And I got involved with big cats around the country for a while. They had on the time over 8,000 on the register.
What do you think, Steve, to the big cat phenomenon and this fact that they're often seen in areas of high strangeness?
Well, they are, yeah. I mean, big cats are. It could be the fact is that, you know, a lot of places with high strangeness have been very rural places, you know, and the phenomena can also track certain locations which coincide with large cats which follow train tracks. Yeah. You know, from one destination to another. They had over 8,000 on record, including lynx, puma, all sorts of things. They knew pretty much that the government made a bit of a mess of it all in the 70s regarding the Animal Act, this act that they brought in regarding exotic pets in the UK. They didn't have this kind of amnesty where you would get like with when you've got guns, you go and hand them in, don't take your name, oh, thank you very much. None of that. It was like, well, they made a ruling saying if you have an exotic pet in the country, then you could be fined from this date. And people just thought, well, what do I do with it? I can't just go and drop it off at the local police station, can you? And they just let them go. The thing is, cats are very adaptable, and they've been breeding, and of course, and you know what, the authorities know that, but they don't want to scare people.
Without a doubt. Did you find many cases or reports prior to, what is it, 76 Animal Act, weren't it?
Yeah, I didn't find many.
No,
no, there were a lot more dogman sightings and Bigfoot type sightings and stuff. I mean, I trace that back to, there were some old prisons in the 15 and 1600s. And there was one certain prison, which was not too far from London, was actually be closed down because something which was being described as a dogman or werewolf type creature was apparently appearing in the cells, and people were dying. You know, people were dying literally of shock, and you know, the expressions on the face, they couldn't understand what was actually happening. But other prisoners, though, in other cells, saw what was going on, and they said about the same old stories. This went on, this was strife. It went right through the prison for a good year or so, to the point where that they had to close the prison down. You know, so God knows what was manifesting in there. But there's some really interesting old documents that shows drawings of this creature. Yeah. You know, and write-ups and stuff, and the reasons why that they had to do what they did. So when you start getting into that sort of thing, you start to realize that there's a very close combination between these strange cryptid creatures and other related phenomena, be it supernatural, paranormal, preternatural, or ufological. There seems to be what I call the cocktail, you know. It's up to us. I mean, sometimes it's got to be down to the researcher to pull them out and say, and illuminate them, rather than looking for the one which is most common and say that's what it is.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
like you say, it's just crypto something, but it isn't. I mean, there was so much more there that was just getting thrown away. So it was my job to try and sort of bring them out and illuminate those areas. Okay, right. Well, there was a UFO scene at the time, and all those different cases. Started to figure out that there was certain combinations. So after doing so much work in paranormal, I went into parapsychology. I spent quite a number of years in that. I was involved in the latter part of some of the stuff of the skull experiments into Phenomena project. There is 17 scientific experiments carried out, which were quite alarming. Only 4 have been released to the general public. There's still 13 out there.
Yeah. Just before you go on, Steve, do you want to tell us a little bit about the skull experiment?
Well, I mean, the skull experiment just basically started with mediumistic circle in a place called Skull in Norfolk. It was at their farmhouse. It was in a cellar, 12 by 14 in size. And they reached a point of communicating with what they would refer to as spirits, loosely. And what happened over a period of time, though, is that they started to lose control over the circle, as far as I'm aware. They started getting other entities come forward. They were being filmed. These turned up on the photographs as blues, like an alien grey but blue colour. There was more than one photograph taken of these things. And from what I'm aware of, is that got so... they started losing the circle, the control of this, because there were so many that wanted to come through. And in fact, they were turning out to be hundreds at the end. Robin Froy, who was told to shut the circle down because it could impact on something in regarding time. So they closed the circle down, but unfortunately they were a bit late, and the phenomena followed Robin, and has done to this day.
Right.
Though that he won't publicly declare that in his books, you've got to know him, you've got to be able to talk to him, and he will reveal a lot more than what's gone on. And then I was introduced to 2 physical mediums in Scotland. Was continued experiments into the skull experiments, and Nick Kyle, who was the president of the Scottish Society of Psychical Research, was involved. And there was the manifestation of UFOs, plate-sized UFOs, hovering around the table, and they fired a laser beam out of them down on... I can only describe it as a laser beam. It sounds sci-fi, but it's what it looked like.
Yeah.
Fires down onto the table, and as this was moving around without any sound, by the way, and it looked like a proper craft. It didn't look like a toy or anything like it. It looked like a proper craft, but it was only the size of a dinner plate. It kept the same spot on the table all the time with this light. Then there was balls of light that appeared, and people could catch them in the hands, and you hold them, you could see them in there, and then it was the manifestation started happening, the apportations, and stuff like that. So I met those 2 guys, the physical mediums, at a restaurant, and they were sat on a table adjacent to me. But when they came in, I noticed that certain things were happening at our table. The table would shunt every now and again. Some of the plates and things would move on the table on their own. So I didn't really need to. I needed no evidence to consider. I need to interview these people. I've seen enough already to realise that they're closely connected.
When they started the skull experiment, how long were they working on the experiment before things really ramped up? I mean, are we talking months, weeks, years? 9 months?
About 9 months, I'd say. You've got to build up and build up to the point. So when I got involved in those type of experiments was under the heading Phenomena Project. We purposely took a different name because we didn't want people just to know what we were doing. If we put anything like continued skull experiments in there, people know exactly what we're doing. And we ran some tests and experiments for 3.5 years. That included communicating with them via recorded conversations. Some of those conversations were in a dome, with recorders, and the voice generated inside the dome. not outside the dome. So that it's as if the voice, wherever they were, it was in the dome with the device. And then there was a point where we built up so much good communications that we were being given the opportunity to, do you have any questions? So for years, imagine, Paul, for years, I've been thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could ask some questions? You know, I've always wanted to know these answers. And I was fine with that until this particular day, because I knew I was likely to get the answers. I was very hesitant for some reason. I mean, I really did think to myself, do I really want to know the answers on some of these things? Because doesn't it just take the magic away, you know? But you know what? So I kind of diverted some of them because I didn't really want, you know, to ruin the plan. But I was still curious anyway. So I still wrote 10 questions down, and I went in there, and within 10 minutes, all questions were answered before I even asked the question.
So it knows exactly what. Yep.
Now that proved to me about how deceptive these things can be. So we started in the background, started doing surveys in regarding people who had spirit guides, those sort of things. And we picked 20 people. And they were convinced they were spirit guides with them, you know, that these guys really care for them and protect them and wouldn't lie to them and stuff like that. And we picked 20 because they had stories to tell about information they'd obtained from their spirit guides. And they were saying, well, you know, my spirit guide was, you know, a teacher and, you know, worked at this particular place this time. One of them said I was on a train crash with 2 children. I was buried in Birmingham at this particular place. And there was all these really good areas of research, you know, on 20. How many came back true? None. Not one. Every single one of them was a deception. Every single one of them. And you know what? Some of these people, the longest time, some of these people had this spirit guide, communicate with this spirit guide without any issues for 18 years.
Yeah. I'm sure the people listening, Steve, I know exactly what you mean. But just to clarify, the actual medium was being deceived.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, my question is that, well, how do we know who we're communicating with? Even spirits, you know? And I realized from the parapsychological work I've been involved with and dealing with parapsychology departments that their acceptance of evidence of afterlife is a very problematic thing, because where they get information from to prove that, well, is it from these communications that we're having? But the problem is that we don't know if they're being deceptive, because if they can obtain information from us, then they can tell us anything. It can be Uncle Albert, and it could be, oh, I talked with Auntie Sheila, you know. Really? Have we? You know, how do we even prove it at the end of the day? We can't. So then we have to consider, well, if we can never prove that it is not deception, then we can never prove that it is evidence of the afterlife. And that is the parapsychological stance on it from the universities now.
Which kind of tells us or suggests that it might be some kind of all-encompassing intelligence that's manipulating maybe what we want it to be. If we look for a structured UFO, that's what we'll see. If we look for the dogman stroke werewolf, that's what we'll see. I don't know. You know, it's just
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, so when I realized that, I thought, does it just apply to the paranormal? So the more I researched that, I thought, no, it doesn't. In fact, it actually it fits perfectly in with the UFO, alien abduction phenomena, you name it. There's seemingly, as far as I'm concerned, deception right across the whole board. But you have to look at the big picture to identify it. I mean, if you just look at all the incidents that people are having around the world of UFO sightings, just take a UFO sighting, forget the aliens for a minute. If you just look at the UFO sightings and we calculate from the countries that did participate in the survey, which isn't all of them, as you well imagine, because of the old Iron Curtain type stuff, I don't want to share, is that there's a sighting roughly around about every 8 seconds. Now, we have to take in consideration that, you know, okay, some of them are hoaxes, some of them misidentifications, you know, but then we also have to be conservative, you know, because there's probably a lot more people out there seeing and not saying. So it kind of equals out, well, where are they all coming from? And this is how we got into Project Doorway, because the big question is that we've been told how had this ruse, and if you really think about it, it's like a Star Trek ploy. it's like a scene from Star Trek, that all these different aliens, extraterrestrials, are coming from all these different planets, some out there somewhere in the universe, and traveling here to see good old you and me. Now, at the end of the day, I looked at that and I thought, well, if there's that amount of sightings happening on a 24-hour basis, then where are all the UFOs coming from? Because when I talked to SETI, the astronomer guys there said, well, do you know what? We're not really into UFOs, but what we can tell you is that space is unusually quiet. Unusually quiet. And I thought that was an interesting comment. And I mentioned about all this activity, and they said, well, it's not passive. I said, we might get the odd thing now and again, which we just don't know what it could be. I mean, just because we've got an ionospheric disturbance, which means objects are passing in and out of Earth, and we could say it's like a boat passing through water. Leaves a wake, so it leaves a sign which is measurable by SETI. We don't see them in those numbers. There must be thousands and thousands of these things if they're being seen that many in a 24-hour period. So where they're all coming from? The fact is that there's not enough evidence to even support the fact that they're actually flying in to Earth from further other destinations. They can link up with other satellite systems now, not just on the ground but in orbit as well. And it's just not that busy. It does have things, but just not to that scale. So I started to question the fact is, okay, where are they coming from? Then I looked at the hypothesis of extraterrestrials, and I thought, well, it's very comfortable that the old hypothesis that these are traveling vast distances of space to come to Earth is more something that you'd expect to see in a Star Trek episode. And isn't it funny that all the ETs are bipedal and look slightly different, just like Star Trek episodes? Over 1,200 different entities of various shape and size. Over 30 different types of greys alone. Well, one of which includes long black hair, apparently. And I thought to myself, something doesn't quite fit here, And we started getting more into that, started to realize that we are dealing with a hyper-evasive phenomenon. Now, it's purposely hyper-evasive, and they are crafty. I've got some reports that a very large craft, which was cylindrical in shape, two appendages, it was seen moving slowly through the sky. It was picked up by two different radar systems and military bases. And it seemingly knew it had been registered, or what you might refer to as tagged by the radar system. And it somehow produced two appendages that came out the side of the craft, and it emitted a Doppler 707 track number. Hello, I'm thinking, what? And this is an official document saying that this object purposely produced enough information for it to be misread as a 707 plane, because it knew it was being picked up on radar. And I thought, well, if that's not a hyper-basic maneuver, I do not know what else. They start getting into places like Skinwalker and stuff. When they got into Skinwalker Ranch, they started setting up cameras and things. They set it up where the activity was happening. They decided not to happen over there, just like Poltergeist. Not happen over there, happen over here. So they set the cameras over there. And then it happened over here. So they set cameras. They thought, right, no problem. Let's get cameras up on both. What did it do? It ripped the bloody wires out the camera. These things don't want to be recorded when they don't want to be. However, at the same time, they do interact, but it's always their terms.
On their terms,
Always on their terms, and they do track individualism. When I say track individualism, those people which show interest in this phenomena, they do a track and trace on them. It's like sounds very similar to what's going on these days. They do this track and trace on them, and lo and behold, their lives go in the black book. And sometimes that phenomenon always pops through that open door a little bit now and again. It's like you're tagged in some way.
And it grows, Steve, doesn't it? The more you look into it, and the more you become. There's a reality to it, but the more you're looking and the more you find, it's like the more opens up to you. Do you not think that?
Yeah, absolutely. It does. The more you engage with this phenomenon, even if it's just the research on it, the more they seemingly are aware of our interest and what we've been doing, and they will show it who's more interest back. To the point where, you know, we started with, decided to put a 5-year study plan together called Project Doorway. And we wanted to trace where the phenomena was coming from. What we're trying to do is put a face to the name. I mean, not a face one, not a ruse, not looking up at the sky thinking these things are traveling from distances of planets. This phenomenon is right under our noses. It always has been, it always will be, as far as I'm concerned. And it traces back thousands and thousands of years. Now, you know, this phenomena, it's very clever, very clever. You know, it knows how to appear to be fitting with the era of technology. You know, so we had the phantom airships around about the airship days. We had the ghost rockets around the Second World War rocket stage. You know, and we had the saucers with the flying saucer eras, and then we had all the flying saucer movies, and now we have all the wonderful things now that we're getting, because it's out kind of out there now. But it seems to be very much fashioned in regarding our conceptual understanding of the phenomena. I'm not going to go as far to say it's a topa. In other words, we are creating it. But I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that the phenomena is conjured in many ways.
That's a good point, what you've just said there. I mean, how much of this do you think is the actual phenomena, but it's shaped by our thoughts and throughout the ages, like you've just said? But
yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, in biblical days, they were seen as biblical angels.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's, you know, in the days of the Fae, they were seen as fairies, and you know, but it's the same. You know, the problem is that it's always the same phenomena, but the mask has changed. It just keeps changing its mask, and I don't believe we've ever seen it. I mean, Barry, if you talk with Barry, he'll tell you, I don't believe we've ever seen its real face. I mean, I think his research goes back now regarding Project Doorway to something stupid like 700 BC, you know, and it was reptilian type creatures, you know, serpent worship and stuff. But he said even that is not, he doesn't believe that's the face of the phenomenon. It's always something instead of it, you know.
Unless you can't, Steve, tell us a little bit about the cases that you've researched within Project Doorway.
Well, I mean, some of those cases involve that, you know, that we could pick out sites now through using 2 satellites in orbit. One is a magnetic anomaly tracking satellite for planet Earth and the Moon, actually, and the Sun. But there's also one for gravitational anomalies. So what we do is we look for correlations. And when we first started utilizing this technology, we decided to take 2,000 cases of the most significant, the most world significant UFO cases on record, the world's most significant paranormal cases on record, world's most significant crypto cases, you know, and we just looked through them.
Yeah.
When we started going through it, we went, well, this happened in the positive magnetic region. This happened in the positive magnetic region, and so on, and so on, and so on. We started to realize, well, statistically alone, you should have had at least 50-50, you know, but this is in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, it can't happen. Statistically, it cannot be. You could say, oh, right, it's by a real strange coincidence, it might be 60-40. But when you start getting into the 90s, you say, no, there's a pattern here.
And this is multi-phenomena events.
This pattern was first recognized, as far as I'm aware, and according to Colonel Corso, by the US military government in 1982, because they were tracking 7 different magnetic anomalies in association to the manifestation, I like the word, manifestation of the UFOs. This isn't a UFO flying in. This is a light bulb switch on, bang, hello, guys, I'm here. And they depart in the same manner. So we know that they're seemingly jumping into our reality and jumping out. So this leads to the thought pattern that these things are more likely appearing here on Earth through those means than traversing the distances which would be likely to be able to pick up as things travel through Earth's atmosphere. So what we started to look at then is that, could we pick out, if we're right, then we can go to locations and know we will experience phenomena at that location. So we did, and we put it to the test. We ended up in the mountains, near Palm Springs, and we had a close encounter experience whilst we were there. And it switched on like a light. We had all our cameras out, Paul. Nothing, which was kind of expected. As soon as we threw them in the trunk and shut the lid, boom, it switched on. Didn't want us to film it, of course.
Yeah.
But we were there for, I mean, everybody was getting a bit glamoured by this thing because we're drawn to the beautiful lights. And they do put on the beautiful lights. But what we've realised within the research we've done through Project Doorway is that it's the magician's hand on many occasions. There is warning devices going off in your body, and sometimes people are disconnected from that. I mean, I always, if I'm out in the field, I'll starve myself with refined sugar for 72 hours. Barry does the same thing. You know, he discovered about the adrenal weakness in this from refined sugar. What's people do on Skywatchers and stuff? Give me the Coca-Cola, give me the Mars bars. And refined sugar is completely disconnected. So when your body is screaming DEFCON 1 at you, saying get the hell out of there, you're not listening. Your body's discord. You know, you're not feeling that thing that's telling you to get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Now you have to, because there is a darker side to this world. It's not all love and light. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been to some places. I'll probably never get invited again, since I had half of them in tears because I expressed my opinions about the subject as UFOs. That's what I was paid to go and do. So I did. But of course, you know, got people crying and saying, I introduced this phenomenon to my 12-year-old daughter. What do you say? I'm thinking, oh my God, are you mad, woman? You know, and I'm thinking to myself, you don't even know what you're introducing her to.
But this is
12-year-old daughter.
This is the people that are introducing their children and portraying it as love and light, and everything's beautiful, and the space beings, and
that's what they want you to think. You see, they want you to think it's all nice and love and light. But at the end of the day, though, you know, they're just going about doing what the hell they want to do. They don't care about us. You know, I mean, you know, you take account that you take Debbie Corbell's incident from Intruders, you know, the movie. Hers was terrible. I mean, she suffered all her life. Her eyes were burned, you know, from the radiation, the ionizing radiation. She had never been right ever since. And what did they turn around and say to her? They turned around and apparently said to her, "Oh, it's unfortunate that you felt that discomfort." Hello, do you know what you've done to her for the rest of all your life? It's like one of those things a dentist might tell you when he hasn't given you an anesthetic and pulls out 10 teeth. You know, it's just you don't care about the pain I'm in, you know. And I'm seeing that all the time. This concern about how they want to be perceived, to gain what they want, and they will tell any nice little stories that they can to do that. But their agenda is just to go ahead and get it done, you know. And do they really care about us? No. I mean, if you just look at
you're aware of the emotional stress and trauma that they're causing.
Yeah, I think they are aware, because there has been times when there has been people claim that they've had these experiences and felt pain, and they've basically come up and, well, they've looked in their eyes, touched their heads, that sort of thing, and that pain's just gone. But it's what they're left with. Mm-hmm. Some of these people are left with more problems than the guys that ended up in the Vietnam War. Seriously.
Do you know, Steve? I mean, this is about talking, but I'm going to touch on, now you've said it. There isn't one night after what I experienced as a child that I don't lay there running this through. I mean, there's not one single night, and there's nothing good come out of what happened to me as a child ever. Absolute terror. And I believe it was fear that they wanted it. I think it was fear. I think whatever it was that was interacting, took something from the fear.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have a disagreement with Jacques Vallée. You know, I mean, he has his beliefs. I have my beliefs. When he's talked about Colares, UFO incident, 1977-78, Colares Island off the shores of Brazil. And most ufologists will know about it, is that this is not just one single incident. You know, it happened all over the place. Happened in India as well, where they came from the sea, UFOs, and they attacked the villagers. And a pencil beam light came down. It passed through the roofs of the houses and through the walls, hit them whilst they were sleeping in bed. They woke up in tremendous pain, absolute agonizing pain, and not being able to move during that incident while this bolt of light they could see coming through the wall hit them on the chests or bodies, and it was only on them for several seconds, but it was agonizing pain. They were left with 7 to 9 puncture wounds in a circular shape, and what they did is they extracted the iron from their bodies. They are gearing up for further contact casing here. I mean, it's something that we found out during Project Doorway, that they seem to evade iron for some reason. They don't, and this is why a lot of people who are having regular contact experiences are quite anemic, you see. So and this was he was trying to put this down as a psyops. I said a psyops in 1977, 78 with all these objects. But absolute rubbish. I mean, the military were involved, became Project Plato, and or Operation Saucer, and the military officers were involved.
Do you think that was something to fit his belief system?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, because you know what, there are people that don't want to consider and just call it for what it was. I mean, I just keep saying to people, look, you know what, I don't have that belief system. I'm just calling it as I see it. And I see it, if anybody else has done it, you see it, well, it was a bad incident. Bad incidents happen. These things, the Crab Island incident, one guy had a hole this big inside that went through him. God knows how he survived. Then you got the Barroso case, and he got shot by this thing. He went back in mind. He aged, and he lived on another 15, 20 years, but he went back in mind as a child, to the point where he couldn't even eat and couldn't even speak, and then he died from unknown circumstances. Some really strange, weird stuff happens out there. It isn't all love and light. So what I say to people is that whilst you're out there, there's a mechanism that you can rely on. And Barry wrote a really good paper on this, and it's about our fight or flight. It's that survival sense. It's in us. When we're, just for the sake of the paranormal guys out there, when they're walking around someplace and all of a sudden all the shackles go up, the hair on the back of the body, and you get that feeling, it's your survival sense saying, well, you know what, there's something here. I might not be able to see it or hear it, but your organ, your biggest organ is your skin. It's telling you, it's screaming at you, in fact. There's a problem. There's a problem.
Well, Steve, just before we get to Les with some questions, because I'm sure he'll have some now, where can people find this paper that Barry's written, or information about you? I know we might touch on it before you go, but these live streams tend to run right till last, and the info's gone.
If you go to YouTube and type in Project Doorway or Steve Mera or Barry Fitzgerald Project Doorway, you'll find quite a number of things that we've done on Project Doorway. The first paper we've released of 12 is up on our website, which is Steve Mera, which is my website, stevemera.com.
Okay.
And you can click on Project Doorway there, and you can read the first scientific paper. There's more papers coming, because this research now has just opened up a whole new area of new study. Because what we've realized is that we now have the opportunity to go back and look at paranormal and look at parapsychological experiments. And now with that data, look at what we presented and say, okay, what similarities do we have here? What correlations do we have? I mean, a typical example is in Morecambe, about 9 years ago, I did a case where it was a poltergeist infestation, and they were reporting, so it's happening nearly every day, and they were reporting objects moving around, or apports, you might say, suddenly appearing, as if they'd been moved. And they were going through a terrible time, this couple. And I went to investigate it, and there was an incident where a mug, just an example, a mug moved, was suddenly disappeared, and turned up 96 minutes later, or found 96 minutes later, in a different place. So we measured, it's what we refer to as displacement of that object. In other words, how far did it move? And we do that on purpose because sometimes when objects are moved from one place to another, the reoccurring numbers turn up, which means this is a form of mechanism at play here, not just random. So we took the mug and we asked the person about it. She said she bought it at Christmas as a set of 4 in a pack, only a few months old. So we said, well, can we take the mug away and analyze it? Which we thought, well, this I'm not aware of anybody doing any analysis on airports. I thought, well, here's my opportunity. She said, yeah. I said, well, can I have a I said, do you mind? I'll pay you for them, but can I have one of your unaffected mugs? You know, not the apported mugs. So we wrote A on this mug, you know, the normal mug. We took them away because we had to have a test sample to test it by, and we took it to Lancaster University, and we had some tests carried out. Atomic microscopy tests on it. In other words, it was broken down and looked at. Now, here's the real interesting point. You might look like a mug. It might feel like a mug, and it weighs the same as the mug. In fact, in all intents and purposes, it's no different than this mug. But when you put it under a microscope, it's not the same mug. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's more information on a microscopic scale there to show that it's not the item that left. Even though that we could argue the point, is it being so adversely affected through the process of what's happened to it? Or how do we even prove it's the right mug? I mean, as far as we're concerned, it's a mimic. It's not the same mug it left. So we took it away. We had it away for about 10 days. Now, taking in consideration, this family were having these paranormal poltergeist type disturbances every day for almost 6 days solid, nothing. Not whilst we had the mug.
Right.
So it subdued, the phenomena subdued. It was like he probably didn't know what the hell to do. So we started to think, hang on a second, if this is an item that's come from some other reality, okay, it is from the other side, because we can't prove it's from this side because it doesn't look like it is under the microscope, because we can cross-check it for a real mug. We can tell, well, that's how it's supposed to look. What is it? What's it doing? What's the reason? What's the cause? Is it more than just a random event here? We started to realize that there's a good chance this is acting as some type of quantum bridge between the phenomena and the location, because the phenomena from its reality takes it and provides it back, but it's not the same. And now when it knows where it is, it can just spool out phenomena to that location. But we removed it, we took it away. And now there was this discourse as to what's going on. And then suddenly this subdued happened. And it was fine for about 6 days, started creeping back in. And once we realized that, we thought we're still going to put this to the test. So other cases like this, where there was apportations, we started to do the same things. And we started to realize some of the phenomena followed the objects for a short period of time. And whilst it was, the suppression in the location and the environment where it was incident happening went down. We thought, well, I think it's some type of bridging effect here. It's a quantum bridging going on. It's linking. So maybe they put things in the environment. Now it's interesting that the fact is that an apportation could take place in your house. You would never know. It could happen when you're not around. You thinking you're picking up and drinking from the normal mug. It turns out it's not the normal mug. Something significantly different. But here's the very interesting point about all this. The analysis showed a certain trace diathermic reaction had taken place. Nothing I'd seen before. Well, I didn't think I'd seen before. A few weeks later, I'm thinking to myself, I've heard of it. Where have I seen it? And I went through all our paranormal records and documents and everything, thinking there must be something else like that because it sounds familiar, this. And I couldn't find it. So a good few months passed. And then one night I had one of those light bulb moments, you know, bing. I'm not looking in the right place. I need to look in the UFO stuff. So I went to the UFO stuff and there it was, made the connection straight away. There was an incident, a UFO had manifested, very well-known incident, manifested close to the ground. And in the field of the UFO, it affected the plants. So I've got the report there, the biochemical traumatology report of the plants. Bingo, exactly the same trace diathermic reaction in the plants as the mug. So I'm thinking to myself, so does the manifestation, the sudden appearance of a UFO and the sudden appearance of a mug utilize the same physics here? So this is where I started to get, okay, all right, I'm going to follow this because I know that there's likely more things happening here which are connected. So then you start looking at the paralysis cases in paranormal phenomena, you know, bedroom paralysis, sighting of a shadow figure. And then you've got the UFO incidents and the entities and the paralysis, which are utilized. And the phenomena is not doing anything apart from pressing our buttons. Because every night when we go to sleep, we end up in rapid eye movement. We try and sleep roughly 8 hours, if we're very, very lucky, to try and grab about 20 minutes REM. That's all our body really requires. But we're in and out most of the night. We spend it in hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, in and out. But at the process of REM, we are actually paralyzed. The body does it automatically. It paralyzes us. We have input blockade, so we don't hear, output blockade, so we can't move. The phenomenon is just pressing the buttons. It just comes along and presses those buttons, which is links to spinal cord, which means that you can't move. All it is electrical impulses that's required in the brain to do that process. So we thought, okay, there's other similarities. Then we got into the infrasound. Now we realized that UFOs are generated in infrasonics. They generate infrasonics on purpose to generate the fear factor. In many cases, they switch it on. In many cases, they'll produce around about an 18.98 hertz or 19 hertz, the fear frequency. And all of a sudden, people will be absolutely filled with dread. I mean, undescribable dread and fear that they can't understand, but they just, oh my God, I have to get out of there. You know, they're generating certain frequencies. We know this because insects and birds fall silent. They can hear infrasonics, they think they're predatory, and they just go quiet. Spielberg put it in his movie, you know. So we know that they started to generate stuff like that. So we thought, okay, they have these amazing capabilities. They're hyper-evasive. They're going about the business we can't do anything about. This phenomenon is seemingly more likely under our noses until we start looking at C5. And you've got 5 people meditating, doing the same thing as 5 people around a medium circle, doing exactly the same thing, conjuring the phenomenon.
We'll jump to see Steve in a moment. But let's ask Les if he's got any questions, because I'm sure he has, because it's been riveting, honestly. And we'll just switch you off for a minute, Steve, and we'll see whether they've got. It's brilliant, but honestly, I've not had to say a word. It's great. Les?
Yes, very informative, that, Steve, and great to listen to. I've got a question from Val. Mr. Mera investigated my Dyserth, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, Dyserth, alien sighting. Can you ask to verify? Do you know anything about that, Steve?
I've done over 1,000 of those cases, but it's you know what, I'm not trying to be ignorant, but I remember being involved in one of the cases like that. But there's been so many that I've been involved in. They all just meld into one thing now. You know?
Give us a trigger, and then Steve might be able to elaborate more.
Yeah, I dealt with 4 in the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, Les.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Space Cadet Lottie. Can Steve recall the case years ago where he filmed the black thing rising up to the kitchen ceiling, as it's always stuck in my mind, but I can't recall the case? Cheers.
Oh God, there was a few. There's a couple. There was one which where there was an object that was seen with dark shape moving around the kitchen, which we actually snapped on photos. There was another one that was caught on a camera system. It was set up in a kitchen which was locked off, and made this very strange spiral black shape, and that was unusual as well. I mean, again, there's been so many. I really do apologise for people asking about.
Don't apologise at all, Steve, because I fear it when somebody asks me for a story from one of Truth Proof books, because I know I've written them, I've researched them, but I can't remember them all.
There's so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done 39 years. I've done over 800 hauntings and maybe about 20 different poltergeist cases, and you know what? After I've been all over the country doing it, and a lot of these incidents are very, very similar, if not identical, where people have reported things. I have a process of trying to gather evidence. I mean, people are saying about if I've been involved. I don't yet. I've likely have been involved. I would have took on board that, you know, if I say I believe that something's actually happened there, I really truly do. And nobody will ever change my mind on that. I mean, I'm quickly to turn around and say to people if I think they're a bit dodgy, you know, and that's just the way I am, you know, because there is real phenomena out there. And but you know what, when people contact me, they've already pretty much done that work. they've already gone through and questioned themselves about this over and over again. And they've gone through all that process. So when I come along, I already realized to the point where, well, do you know what? These people have actually witnessed something. And I truly, absolutely believe them, you know, because that's how this phenomena works. It's very, very tricky and crafty.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Bringing you back to the big cats, Steve. Teresa Walker is asking, do you think the big cats have hybridized and a subspecies has resulted?
There's a number of subspecies that have resulted. Yeah, there's a couple of kind of feral tomcat type cats which are bred with other cats now. We're already aware of that. They're just not publicly named, you know, in the sense of because therefore they have to be officially recognised by the zoological departments and things like that. But yes, the thing is that what they didn't realise is that these animals are the most adaptive animals in the world. It can survive the coldest winters, believe it or not. They can survive the hottest summers. You know, sometimes they don't have to eat as often as we think they have to. They have strict patterns. They follow train tracks, absolutely follow train tracks, because, you know, they don't want to be seen. You know, the likelihood that people are seeing these is when it's early hours of the morning. Milkmen, the amount of people from Milkmen have contacted me and said, I see them all the time. It's amazing. You know, I mean, the last investigation that I did on a big cat sighting was in Burnley, on the outskirts of Burnley. The milkmen were reporting it, residents were reporting it. I took somebody else's advice to do a stakeout, or it's kind of a stakeout in a sense of speaking, and somebody told me to put foxweed on my shoes because it will disguise your scent. Oh my God. Mrs. wouldn't allow me in the house for weeks. I had to throw them away. You'll never get the scent out. Straight in the bin they went, honestly. I mean, blimey, flipping that, yeah, I'll disguise my scent and everybody else, I think, those things. But you know what? There was scat hair samples. Do you know what? The authorities know these exist. There's no big secret, but they have to control it in a way where there's a subdued panic, because there are idiots out there that will do stupid things and make a big story out of it. And before you know it, you've got a headline with some killer cat on the front, and all it was doing was trying to ignore us, because that's what they tend to want to do these days, you know.
Do you know that you're so right? In our research during Wolflands, we've found out that there's gamekeepers up in North Yorkshire that actually know that there's breeding pairs of big cats up in those forests, and they're quite happy to let it happen. They're good for the environment, they think.
So, well, yeah, I mean, there's a balance. The thing is that, you know, I think under the circumstances, it's not going to go away.
No,
and it's not something new. It's been going on. It's definitely going on since the 70s. And we have links. We have wonderful. In fact, we've got our own British birth bobcats now, which are not officially recognised, but they do exist. You know, so yeah, there's lots of things out there in the wild.
There is. Now, Les, have we more questions?
Yeah, sure. I've got a question from Tino. Welcome to the show, Tino. Yeah. Hello, Steve. Has any activity resumed at the house of the Rochdale poltergeist?
No, it hasn't. I mean, we did our investigation. We went in to investigate the case on behalf of Rochdale. This is one of those confidential cases I was doing over the 17 years. It was Rochdale City Council contacted about this, and it was a poltergeist case. There was water formings. It was analysed. It was not tap water. It wasn't rainwater. It had very unusual properties in regarding the UCSM conductivity level of it was quite profound. And the family got relocated. We had the family relocated to another home. The phenomena followed them for a few weeks and then fizzled out, but did follow them for a few weeks. The house, under our guidance, was followed under the protocol that we provide to city councils. When I say followed, I mean we get them to board up the house for 12 months. And the mains coming into the house, and I don't mean at the consumer end. In other words, the 3-phase coming into the house is cut off, so there's no power whatsoever going into that building, and it's basically left fallowed for 12 months to try and void of any energies that could cause manifestation of phenomena, and it was done. And then another family moved into the building, and we had a special meeting with the council, and we devised a special form for allow us to submit the form to these new people without and finding out the information about if they're experiencing anything without actually having to ask the question. Now that was the most trickiest form we ever had to make, is that you want to know if they had any paranormal disturbances, but you can't ask the damn question. So we had to sit around the table and work out, well, we have to kind of say, you know, environmental anomalies, you know, and or any occurrences in the house that you know that you've not reported to the city council, and just things like that to gather an image of what's happening. Turned out the family were okay. The disturbances mysteriously stopped, but it did follow them. It did follow the other family for 3 weeks until it fizzled out. But hopefully now the building is good. You know, it's okay as far as I'm aware.
Very good, Les.
Oh yeah, fear feeders. The parasitic, absolutely parasitic. I mean, in some cases, I mean, for the paranormal, it utilizes fear to generate vexation, stress, emotion. And what it does is it utilizes that to create the next phenomena. And then it's going to put on a show. It's a theatre act. It'll make sure that it happens damn well in front of you for you to recognize it's a paranormal act and generate fear and vexation. It takes it again, and so on, and so on, and so on. The cycle goes. You've got to starve the phenomena. There's a method of starving phenomena. It starts with the people who are experiencing the phenomena in their homes, about taking control, about educating them about how the phenomena works. Because sometimes if they can bring down their stress levels, they will see a direct proportional action take place. And the phenomena starts to drop at the same time as the vexation cycles start to drop. And once you reinforce that and say, well, see, you are in control here, then you're halfway of getting there. And, you know, within 3 weeks, you can actually diminish poltergeist disturbances, you know, if you can remove the vexation from the environment. But it's, you know, everything in this life is built around making this fearful. Have you ever seen a paranormal film that's not fearful?
You're correct.
But they want to generate that, you know, so they want to teach people to be fearful of it, so therefore they are. So it's a bit of a nasty situation, you know.
How much do you think is location based, and how much do you think is people based? As in, do you think the person at a certain location accentuates it, or what's your view?
That's a good question. I think in many cases, it's a lot of this phenomenon is people orientated.
Yeah.
Very much so. Though that we do have residual phenomena taking place, but you know what? I think it gets wrongly termed. I think we need to take that out, the haunting word category, and put it somewhere else where it should belong, such as recorded events that get played back. I think there's a natural earthly, you know, reason for those sort of things, because they don't interact. It's not like an interactive with intelligent haunting sort of thing, you know, where they interact with the environment, the current environment, and those within it. So I think they were kind of two different things, but mostly from what I'm dealing with people problems, you know, and how the phenomena intertwines their lives. No, it's not always in a good sense, like I say, and that's not just the paranormal. I mean, the ufological aspect is exactly the same. I mean, these things, I mean, are doing certain things on purpose to generate fear. When it comes to the animal mutilation phenomena, I'm not going to go straight heavy into this because, you know, where we're actually going out on YouTube and whatnot, but they generate fear in these animals, so that, and the animals are alive at the time of these incidents happen. They need them to be, because again, there's another paper that's coming out on this, and it's about the mucous membrane, and what happens is under those conditions is that the animal goes into super fear and generates huge amounts of cortisol and adrenaline, and that fires off into the mucous membrane, hyper elevating their immune system. And that's where the blood lies, and the soft tissue, where all these immune things are. They take it from soft tissue in the blood. And I think it's all about the immunity, you know. And again, Barry and his wife have done a great research on this, and the evidence would support that they do that for a particular reason, you know. And exactly the same thing's happening, to generate fear in people.
Yeah.
How many times do we hear people that are out in places, they see strange lights in the sky, next minute they hear knocking on a tree, or stones being thrown, they think they see a Bigfoot, or there's a Bigfoot or something like that there. Absolute dread is pushed into them, and all it is like, get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they do. Isn't it a great way to clear an area? It's just great, isn't it? It's just get rid of it.
I know Les will have a few questions, but just to stick with it for the moment. So if you've got a kind of sensitive or a person who can tune into this stuff naturally anyway, is it worth taking them to the areas of high strangeness?
If you're attuned to it, because sometimes, if you do keep getting involved so much, it's like a lemon, you never forget the taste, and it's a bitter taste sometimes. And unfortunately, it happens the more times you get involved in this. It's like it draws you in, and then it starts to interact, and then you got to kind of sort of take a step back sometimes, because you think to yourself, okay, well, I don't want it to interfere with personal life, I don't want it to interfere with family and friends, but it can do, and it will do, in some cases. And all you can do is kind of go, I'm not in control of this, they're in control. And that's, because of the interest. But the problem is that I think when it comes to stuff like that, it's positives and negatives. The positives are certainly outweighed by the negatives, absolutely. I mean, you hear about people's positives, but then is it a positive? I mean, how do you measure a positive action? That they haven't had a negative one is a positive one, is that it? How do you measure it? I mean, if 3 police officers bust in here to arrest me and take me away, is that a positive or negative experience? Well, to me, as the experience, it's negative. But the police is just following agenda, it's just their job. Yeah. They don't care if it's positive or negative, they don't care what I think. And this is the kind of situation I try and tell people, that, there is good points and bad points. The good points is that in some people, it has enhanced their abilities in ESP or PSI type stuff. There are people that have kind of had downloaded intuitions which have sent them on a different journey, a very successful and positive journey, because they interfere with our lives, they interfere with our history, they guide us through it, they've messed about with us constantly, right from the beginning, steered us, interfered, all sorts. And
kind of leads us down the road, Steve, where they could interfere with certain individuals to change the course of history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he did that with Alexander the Great, how they realized that it would be successful for him to accomplish his task. And when he eventually came across a number of cities, one of which was Jericho, these craft, he couldn't gain in. He couldn't besiege them because of them 50-foot walls. These flying shields, it's documented in historical information on more than one account. Flying shields turned up, fired a pencil beam light down, we've heard that before, onto the wall, and the wall disintegrated, allowing Alexander to besiege the city. Now, we hear of incidents like that. If it's not Moses leading the Israelites out of the desert with 4 flaming shields in the sky, which are quite happy to pass manna down to them, which is their supplement food, so they didn't all starve. I mean, the thousands and thousands of references throughout history. All we've got to do is look at it and how we did interpret it.
It's exactly like you said, probably at the beginning when we started talking. It's been with us since the first time we documented anything.
Yeah,
it really has.
It is. We're there looking out like this. So let's go up this hill. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I get invited to a lot of sort of sky watchers and stuff, and I don't do many of them because I kind of see them for what it is. I mean, I know this from us right round us. I mean, I've been on sky watchers and I've seen bugger all night, like most people. On my way home, I see something cross the road in front of me. Yeah. What the hell's all that about? I just spent a night on up there. This is how it annoys me, because this is how it interacts. And it's and I think to myself, do you know what? I'm not getting to the root of it here. The root of it is right round me and watching me, and it knows I know now.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm on the same page there. We'll just ask Les if he's got any more questions.
Yes, we're getting some great questions in tonight, and thanks everybody who's forwarded the questions for Steve. I've got one question here, but I really want to ask this one at the end, bro. I'll put it to you now, Steve, so you can think about it. Steve, is there one incident that stands out for you? So that Jane Louise Bowery is asking that question. Is there one incident in your 39-year career? Is there anything there what stands out? You can leave that till the end if you like and think about that one. Okay, we'll move on from that one. Question Val, from Val. Steve, you made a short film called Beyond Doubt. The Deseth case was on that film, and my painting was on there. Is it still there on YouTube?
It is. I think it's under. It could be a YouTube website, a YouTube channel called Telcom85, TLCOM 85, or it could be Mapit, MAPIT, or just Steve Mera, you know. But it's definitely still up there, yeah, because there was these I was giving these drawings, they were interesting, and I remember doing that filming. God, that was. Blimey, that was some years ago. I was living in Ashton Mersey in Sale then when I made that. So that's, yeah, but yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's definitely still up on YouTube, yeah.
You're done. He really has. And just before you get into the question, because he'll jump on me if I don't do it. Truthproof.uk is our website, and Don's the webmaster. Thank you very much, Don.
Good.
Right.
I've been accused of not having my mic on. I didn't have it on then. I'll ask that question again. Don Lodge is asking, what does Steve think of the work of the Malachi Martin? Do you know about that one? Malachi Martin, Malachi Martin.
Ooh, I don't know. You have to.
No.
We don't know anything about that one.
Well, no. I wish you'd have told me this, Steve.
Is it a place? Is it a place?
There's no the parts of
the chat, I think.
Yeah, if Don's still there, I'm sure he'll come into the chat and just direct us on that one for you. Question from Deborah. What is your scariest experience? Well, that goes back to the early question I was going to leave to the end.
No, he's got an experience and a scary one. Let's leave it.
I'll give it a scare.
A scary one then.
Yeah, let's give you a scary one where I was investigating a farmhouse of alleged demonic activity in Wales. The house actually was found burnt down to the ground after the family fled from there. But they were reporting a very large 7-foot figure and in black, and you know, when they went around the garden, they found some stones which had symbols on them, which were clearly satanic symbols. Something dodgy had been going on at the farmhouse prior to them buying, and they'd left the home, and they'd left the keys at the mother-in-law's, and I said I'd pay a visit, and this is my second visit, because the first visit was just to interview them and whatnot, because the place was being trashed all the time. There was bad smells, there was pig noises coming from the walls. I mean, it's just not good. And I went to have a look at the location, look at the house, got the keys from the mother-in-law, went down there. And I'm walking around a kind of halfly dim house because all the curtains were drawn. Now, they purposely shut all the curtains because, you know, they weren't there, so they didn't want people looking in.
Yeah.
I was walking from one room to another, and something caught my eye to the left of me in another room. And I stopped, and I looked like what I thought was a dog of some sort, a chunky dog, you know, but it was just silhouetted black in a dark room. But I stopped and looked at this, and I kept my eyes on it because I'm thinking to myself, is it a dog? I don't remember seeing it before when I've been in or walked around, and I'm looking for the slightest movement, and I saw a little shunt, and I thought, what is that? What is it? Is this animal got in or something? Anyway, I looked at this thing, like bloody stood up, didn't it? And this thing was 7 foot tall. I tell you what, I got a hell out of there. I mean, it's a point. Honestly, I got a hell out of there, and then I didn't go back there. And 4 days later, the house burnt down to the ground with no apparent reason. It was an investigation, and don't know how it actually burnt down to the ground. The family had already gone through hell, and that's why they got out. But yeah, I saw this thing turn from this crouching. I don't know if it was crouching or it was something else, but it just kind of become it stood up, and it was bigger than me, and I'm 6'2", so I thought, I'm out of there. No, I don't. It didn't. It seemed to be a human figure. I thought it was an animal at first, but when it stood up, I thought, well, you know what, I'm out. I'm out of here, and off I went. Yeah.
Okay, Les?
Yeah, I think that's it for now. A couple of questions a bit later on, guys. I'll let you run with the show.
Yeah.
Okay then, Steve. Obviously, there's no stopping you when you get going, but who do you think has broke any new ground in the last 20 years?
There's a number, actually. There's a guy, Delsim has, he won't talk about it publicly, a lot of the stuff, Delsim's, but he knows, and he's got evidence of, he's like he said, people don't want to hear the really negative stuff. You can't go out there and go to conferences and start talking about this stuff, but he says he's aware, he knows, he doesn't paint a pity picture about it. I've been in quite a number of few talks, so I would say, Dell's done some great jobs, but the unfortunate thing is we're not likely to hear it because he won't ever talk about it at public events, because he said people just can't. I can't talk to people about that. It's too sensitive.
Yeah, and obviously then we don't need to hear nitty gritty of that. Just to briefly, if it's anything like the missing people, I don't like talking about them.
I was just about to say, David Pilardes. I mean, he's his most of his, if not nearly all of them, those profound disappearances are taking place in positive magnetic regions. Isn't it really weird and strange how to again correlate with the UFO incidents and paranormal and the cryptids and all sorts of things? So I'd say definitely him, and of course your work as well. I mean, it's really good that we're getting that information out, because do we see it's good to see the correlations between other people. I mean, there's a case that it's very hard to find. You won't find it on the internet. It's Marley Woods. Now, I talked briefly on it because a lot of people really know. I think Marley Woods is 2 farms, like Skinwalker.
In UK?
No, in the US.
Okay.
And Jacques Vallée was involved, and it is super, super sensitive, these cases. And they nicknamed them Marley Woods to make you think it was something completely different. But it turns out, no, it is actually 2 farms which are having strife, absolute strife. All eyes are focused on Skinwalker at the moment because of a very profound television show, and of course not well away from these other places. But if you start to look into about the incidents of like Skinwalker, you've got this multitude of interacting phenomena, some of which you can only say delivers high strangeness. It's happening in your neck of the woods, Paul. It's happening in other places around the world. But there's these key locations where there's an imprint between seemingly 2 realities. Now, we know that from Skinwalker, because what was happening was there's CCTV footage out there, if you can get to actually see it, is that buildings would appear on CCTV camera. They'd suddenly just fade in, stay for a few seconds, and these buildings are really huge buildings, stay for a few seconds, and then just disappear, fade out.
So are we getting a glimpse of another reality?
Like another reality, I saw. But what was interesting is that the reports from the people who were at Skinwalker was that they kept finding these huge areas of where the land was pressed in. Now, it's very, very hard soil because it's very dry. But to press this down 8 inches or so, we're talking tremendous, tremendous weight here. But then we also know through the work of Project Doorway and being assisted by David Adair. I don't know if you know David Adair, the rocket
No,
genius. Yeah. The thing is that the light around these craft, there are certain ones. There are ones that we refer to as amber gamblers because they're amber, and you always take a gamble with them. Yeah. They will tend to interact and turn up. They're the most common ones, and those are the ones that often can lead you astray, and are usually associated to areas of diverse phenomena happening. Okay. These things have been around forever, these things. However, we know that they generate a certain light field around them. That light field is usually measurable within the terahertz frequency range. The terahertz frequency range is very familiar in some of the works of Mete-materials, UFO Mete-materials, where they can apply terahertz frequency to them, and some of these things will hover. They will become weightless under the terahertz frequency light that's emitted across them. Turn off the light, they drop back down. But when they drop back down, they become up to 700 times heavier than they initially were.
Hence the depression.
So it could be, and we talked with David Adair on this, and he confirmed that he had the same information, that one of these things had come down on a train track and literally bust through. The weight of it actually bent these tracks flat, absolute flat. Whatever this craft was, which was about 50 or 60 feet in diameter, was super heavy. It's a lot heavier than it should have been, but because under the circumstances, maybe that they had no light around it at the time when it landed, it obviously caused this huge impression into the train tracks. And then they started doing research into how heavy are UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them. And this is where that research went. And we started looking at the metamaterial analysis that was going on. And the fact is that there's an isotopic differential of 4% here, which is mad. I mean, we have 1%, we question the fact that's a bit strange, but 4% means that it's the isotopic elements used here, that they're found on planet Earth. The isotopic range shows that they are not here from Earth; they're actually somewhere else, unless they're actually changed through the manufacture. They're manufactured under zero gravity, to an eighth of micron, which is like about an eighth of your hair width, where different plates are put together in kind of a 3D printing process. And we have no idea that they're manufactured in a certain way of metals which have never been placed together before, that react to certain conditions, and they react to sound and they react to light. Now, when is the terahertz frequency most prominent? It's at the rising and the setting of the sun. So you're going to see amber gamblers when after the sun sets, prior to sunrise. That's their time. The terahertz frequency coming from them. It's the same from the sun when we get there. That's why people meditate at those conditions, the terahertz frequency. That's why the ancients did exactly the same thing. When the terahertz frequency of the light entered into the chambers, and they're on the same score. They were just a little bit more into it than we are. They probably knew a lot more than we do.
I would totally agree. You might not answer, not want to answer. Do you think any one person or organisation then are sitting on the truth, or sitting on knowledge that could take away, say, the stigma of UFOs, unexplained phenomena?
Well, I'm in talks with one. All I can say is the scientific.
It's not planned, people, this question. Steve answered it like that. I just throw it out there.
Yeah, I can't even mention the organisation because some kind of part of it I'm not allowed to say. But there are people in it that are associated to the research of this phenomena, will know their names from the inner circle of ufology as the extreme academics, which have been involved in numerous different studies, and the government, which are involved in these studies, that are sitting on information which we are not going to get, and I don't think we're going to get for a long time, to be honest with you. They know that they've known for such a long time about the PSI of this. It's, you know, it's a communication, it's the consciousness side communication stuff. It's you know, some of these crafts aren't even manned. Some of these crafts are so intelligent that they're actually like a living organism themselves, and they know when you're consciously watching them because
you know,
they connect with you.
The first website, Intelligent Life Forms, I thought the stuff that we were observing on the walls, Steve, and out at sea off Bempton, which Chris Turner and Jerry Denning happened to see when they came through, well, I thought it was intelligent light. I still do. You know, I don't know what's behind it. Yeah. There could be something structured behind it, but to me, I don't think there is. Well, sorry, I've cut you short there, Steve.
You're right. They're intelligent. I mean, they can play tricks. They'll allow some people to watch. They'll stop other people from watching it. You know, they'll turn off when somebody wants to try and watch it, or they'll put on a show for somebody they do want to watch. I mean, they can do all that. They mess about with people. But absolutely, they connect with us in regarding observation. We had this with fighter pilots during the shoot down orders in the 1980s. I mean, it was stupid. Shoot them down. I mean, really? You're going to get a chance to do that? But nevertheless, though, you know, pilots attempted to do so. What happened was, as soon as they become to get a weapon lock on these things, they did a super maneuver, an evasive maneuver, and they think, well, how did it know? So they're just about to put weapon lock on it, and it does it again. It's as if they were measuring the intent from the observations from the pilot. So
this is the intermind connection. Is it the intermind connection, or do they perceive the technology? Is it what are they? I know we're only theorizing, but
I think it's this, because I've heard information where drones have been more successful at engaging, and they're not. There's no consciousness there, you see.
Yeah.
Now, but I mean, of course, drones won't act like pilots do, you see. So, and of course, when pilots are engaging these things, it's about seemingly this connection, this conscious connection with the pilot. It's similar to, you know, you have Stephen Gray, who's been doing these CSETI-5 gatherings, meditation groups, and they sit in a circle and they meditate, hoping for the phenomena to reveal itself in the sky. And in some cases, it does. And the phenomena that appears is the real phenomena. This is no parlor trick. This is no mimic or topa. It is the real thing. You press the doorbell and they've opened the door, you know, and they will interact with those individuals for good or worse, you know. I mean, I'd always like to go back in 10 years' time and go back to that meditation circle and say, what your life has been like. Well, tell me, how's it been since the last 10 years, you know? I'm always keen to do things like that. But you know what? In the days of the German Metaphysical Society, which became the Vril Society, we're doing exactly the same thing. You know, it's the same thing of having 5 meditators trying to will a phenomena to appear, and it does. And with 5 mediums around a mediumistic circle. I mean, if you take, for an example, the Philip experiment, which took place in Ontario in Canada, they manufactured a ghost, and they experienced the apparition and the ghost from the incident simply by manufacturing him through energies, creating him, the conjuring of it. So yes, you can conjure the phenomena paranormal. If you've got a normal house and you will tell people it's haunted, and you allow people to come in and do their investigations, it will become haunted. We bring this in, we develop it into our reality, in a sense of speaking. This is how people are aware. They think they live their lives and we are disconnected from the reality. We're not. When they are not disconnected, we can't break the rules, but we can certainly bend them. And we can will certain things happen, good or bad. It goes either way. But what we don't realize is that we are closely associated with it. And the more people that gather and do that sort of thing, the more the phenomena will represent itself, simply through the process of communicating with our energies, consciousness in those environments. It happens while you get hotspot incidents taking place. Suddenly all hell breaks loose for a month or so. How many sightings this month? Well, normally 5 or 6. I've got about 70. Why? We suddenly got 70, you know? So it's really interesting when you start following these patterns and events, how much we're associated.
absolutely fascinating, to be honest with you. And I hope people took a lot from what you've just said in the last 3 or 4 minutes, because that were, for me, that were really interesting. And I've cut you short. You're probably not even finished there, Steve. What do you think then to the so-called mind speak that people hear when they've had some kind of interaction with a alien type entity or Bigfoot type entity, and clairvoyance? Are we dealing with the same thing?
I think it's all really one and the same thing.
I mean, I know we've done that, but just I'm on about the actual word.
The thing is that this will perceive to be what it wants to perceive it to be. You know, I mean, you know, children have had experiences from early ages. Adults still have experiences at older ages. There is no limitations. They can appear to be what they want to appear to be. If they want to follow the common trend at the moment, you'll fall into a common trend. You know, I mean, people keep asking, where's all the space brothers gone? I said, well, they're still there. They just changed the clothing and the face. That's all they've done. You know?
See what I'm liking here, Steve, and we're speaking a similar kind of thing, or similar kind of vein, but it doesn't help the skeptics and the debunkers, because we're presenting a whole new argument that they've got to face, because they can't possibly get here because they can't traverse the vast distances of space. Well, we're not.
They don't need to, because they're right here.
They're right here. Yeah.
Where people keep saying, "Where's the evidence? Are they going to give you all these abductees? Aren't they giving you something which is extraterrestrial in origin from another planet or something?" Well, no, they're not. And why is that? Well, likelihood is that because they're from here. You know, they're from here. They've always been here, maybe in a different reality to ours. And what they're doing is they're popping in and interacting and popping back out. You know, and they're doing those things. We can't control that. We can't even understand the physics of it. You know, but we do now know that it lies here. A lot of it lies in the PSI, the consciousness, and quantum reality. This is where we're going to get. It's going to end up in quantum reality. And when we start getting into that, we start realizing why the cushion, when you're watching it in a Poltergeist case, you thought you saw it move. Why doesn't it move when you're watching it? Because, you know, we have that famous double slit experiment. It shows that when we observe something, it changes its format, its reality. It changes what it's doing. As soon as we lose our sight of that, take our eyes off it, it'll fly across the room. You know, are we locking it in place by seeing it? Are we affecting the environment around us and we don't even know? Because the phenomena will interact just because we're looking at it. And that's the same for those guys as it is the Poltergeist phenomenon. There's no difference. Just a different.
Before we fire another, before we ask Les if there's any more questions, what's your views on MIBs, Men in Black? Have you researched them? Had any cases?
That's a good question. Yes, I have. I did quite a big case in Menwith Hill, investigating that location in Otley. And just prior to that, I did a case on Winter Hill, which was well, I say many. I called the investigation the Winter Hill Men in Black case because we didn't know who these men were. I received a phone call from a person who was a cattle hand. Who, at that time, he rang me at the time of the incident, which was great. And he was experiencing an object close to ground in the cattle field. The cattle were running and a hell of a stir up. He was out there. This thing ended up chasing him. And he said it was about 20 foot above him. He panicked, came in eventually and started ringing around. He rang the police. There was actually documentation of him ringing the local police, then put through to Stretford Police, the main branch, and then reaching out to me. What happened is that he was adversely affected because of this encounter. And on the Sunday, people turned up at that farm dressed in suits, dark suits, claiming to be MAFF officials, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries and Foods, and threatened the owner of the farm, which was, I believe, was Mr. Wilson, that if he didn't cooperate, these are the guys that can shut you down. I mean, shut you down now. You know, this is this is at a time of all that, you know, that was it foot and mouth and stuff, or what was going around it. So these guys had the clout. All he had to do is sign a dotted line and he was shut down. It was a farmer's nightmare. Of course, he said, yeah, do what you want. I'm not getting involved. You want to talk to my cattle hounds, and he did. And but what interests me is how fast he got there. He got there. Their resources are incredible. They got there before we got there, because they got Murphy, they got the cattle hound, and we don't know what the hell they did, but he ran. He ran. He ran. We knew where he lived. It was an empty house. He ran. He got out of there. I don't know what happened. He relocated. They made him move or whatever. I don't know. But they knew that he was talking to us because he mentioned us by name, these guys. And we were on to the MAFF about this, and they said, oh, no, we don't work Sundays, And but it was interesting when we talked to the secretary prior to waiting for this manager guy, director guy, because this secretary said, oh, yeah, I've heard of that happening a couple of times. And I thought, really? That's interesting. Turns out, though, there was at the time, there was only one cattle farm up there, and the cattle disappeared, and they didn't go to market, and we don't know what happened to them. We got followed whilst we were up there by somebody who stopped us eventually, was very, very aggressive, and was asking us questions. We told him nothing, but we took a registration number, and we had that checked, and it turned out that guy who actually worked at the farm where the incident took place. We thought that was a bit strange. And Murphy disappeared. He completely disappeared. The police wouldn't file a missing persons report because we tried to, and they just didn't seem too interested, to be honest with you. Even though that they had details of him reporting this phenomenon taking place. British Aerospace was just around the corner at the time, so when we were investigating it, we were up there for quite some time. It was quite a lengthy case, and we eventually got in touch with Wilson, and he wouldn't talk to us. We left it a few months, and we eventually went back, and he said, look, honestly, guys, just Murphy's not coming back, and I can't talk to you. He said, because they said they will shut me down, and he wouldn't talk to us. So from what I can gather, he was there as a cattle hound. Wilson wasn't at the farm. He was the owner, but he wasn't there. He brought in as a cattle hound this object, which was about maybe 30 feet in diameter, which was bright, very bright, so it lit up the whole field, was silently moving over the cattle, but the cattle were absolutely petrified. The cattle were trying to run away from this thing, only to be pinned in at a corner and then try and run across another thing. And this tag thing was going backwards and forwards. He heard a terrible noise of all these cows playing up, goes out there, sees this, tries to run over to the cattle to scare them, to get them to move them into an area where it's enclosed, and this thing's above him, and he just thought, you know what, the hell with it, whatever happens to the cows, it happens to the cows. I'm getting out of here. And that is when he panicked. He rang the police, and this is how it traces back. I don't know what happened to the cattle. They never returned, and they didn't go to market because we did tracer checks on that, and it was as if they never did have any animals back at that farm again. Who these people were, their resources are better than ours because they got to that farm the day after the incident. How did they know where to go? I mean, it took us a while to find the bloody farm because there's so many farms up there. Which one's Adam's farm? Is it called out? Well, no, it's not. Mr. Wilson owns Adam's farm. So you think it'd be called Miss Wilson's farm, but do you know what? It took us a couple of days to just find out where the bloody farm was. And I had to do that by grabbing a local postwoman who was up there. But they were there the following day. They knew exactly where to go and when to go to get him there. And he was affected. He said he was, his skin was sore on one side. Sounds like a Close Encounters film, doesn't it? Yeah. This is what he said. And I'm absolutely sure something went on there. And I really don't know, but it was so profound. And I don't know who these guys were. Were they MAFFF and the Ministry of Agriculture, Fish and Foods? Probably unlikely to be there the following day, but could be posing as that, because I think you would have more clout by saying you work from the MAFF than the Ministry of Defence, being the farm owner. They seem to do that. They seem to be there. And that was an interesting case. It's not the only case up there on Winter Hill, which is in the outskirts of Bolton in the UK.
I think
there's been others.
Has Chris Turner been doing recently?
Yeah, he's been investigating some profound sheep killings and things. And you know what? I've had some wacky experiences up there. It's just one of those. It's one of those areas, Paul. You know what I mean? Taste that lemon again. It's like one of those areas.
Right, we've got probably 15 minutes left, Steve. And I've got to say at this point, though, I've really enjoyed speaking with Steve Mera. And anybody that hasn't enjoyed it, you've not been with us. Les, have we got more questions for Steve before we wrap this up?
Yeah, it's been a great show tonight. We've still got some time, so I'm hoping to get some questions in for Steve. A question from Natural Ginger. Question: do you believe, and it's a great question this, do you believe all the big questions are answered when we die? The reason we don't know now is because our earthly selves will be unable to comprehend such info. That's a great question.
Profound.
Yeah. I believe that there are a few different states from when we die. I don't always get into this, to be honest with you. Some people go through a process of a waiting period. There's a small waiting period in case you revive, basically. So sometimes some people report that have been revived, that they were kind of stuck in a waiting situation of what's going to develop next. Am I going to really die, or am I going to be revived? Some people report, beautiful experiences through the near-death experience. Very, very few will report a bad experience. Very, very few. Most of them are good. Most of the people that come back have a different zest of life. Some people come back with heightened PSI abilities and just see life in a different matter. But then there is those that consider that we are living in some form of process-generated reality, and that our brains perceive it to be for what we are. And this reality has hiccups sometimes, and this reality does some strange things sometimes and connects dots which are far beyond coincidences. You will know when you're on the tail of this phenomena, because it spews out multiple serendipities. Multiple serendipities are the most profound connections between dots that open up and fall in place, and that is when you're tracing the phenomena. That's when you're on its tail, because it spews out these multiple serendipities, and that happens. But the answers to questions in life like this, I think we might not. We've got to understand we are confined to the reality that we know, to the information that we've been taught. After that, throw those all restrictions away and we open ourselves to the universe. Who knows, really, at the end of this, what is responsible? Because something is, and something's certainly in charge and does its things. But if we do ever get those answers, it's a shame. Maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe that's the magic of life, is that it keeps humans, us, on our toes, because we are naturally seekers. We are naturally want to travel and learn. We never ever want to stop doing that, and we don't. We thrive. Humans thrive on discovery, so we're always going in leaps and bounds. Will we ever go get all the answers? I don't know. Maybe we won't. Maybe if we take a few steps, whatever's responsible takes a few steps. I hope so, but then then it'll be a life without magic, and I love magic.
Yeah. Thank you, Les.
Yeah, yeah, some profound questions there, Steve. Let's have a look then. We've got a question from, I want to try and go in some sort of order here.
Don't forget the last question, Les. We need 5 minutes for Steve to answer it.
Yeah, Steve, if you could have one thing proven, what would you choose and why that one?
Oh, that's a weird one. Do you know what?
You've never been asked.
Ever been asked. That's a profanity in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
And what's responsible for it all? If we want to refer to it as a god, it's created everything, then how? Who created him? Where is the start? That's the big question, That's what it would ultimately fall down to, is because we can backtrack everything to that. And if there's something responsible for creating everything, because everything has to come from something.
It does, but it's never ending, Steve. We just add another nought, add another nought, add another nought. It's just...
It is the ultimate question. It is the ultimate question, you know.
Okay,
I don't think you understand the answer.
Okay, I'll move on with another question, Steve. Okay, Steve, and that last question was from Umbraman, and thanks for that question, because it's got us all thinking about that one, Umbraman. Question for Steve: what do you make of the Bold Street, Liverpool, and the time warps there? Bold Street, Liverpool.
Yeah, I've heard about them. Yeah, I found them fascinating, to be honest with you. Most people would expect me to say, "Oh, it's a load of rubbish" or whatever. But do you know what? It's intriguing, some of the stuff. I have to say, it's not the first I've heard of those type of incidents. I remember casting my mind back to about 15, 20 years ago. I had an aunt who was into knitting, and she said, "Steve, will I take her to the local shop in village to go and get some wool?" Because, you know, it was easy to get. So it was a lovely summer's day. I took her down to the shop. I parked outside the shops. It was double yellows, but I sat in my car waiting for her, you know, engine running. And she goes in there, and I remember reaching down for a cigarette and grabbing my lighter. And I looked up, and a woman was walking past me. And as she's walking past in front of my car, her shoulder fell off her back. Her bag fell off her shoulder, but she grabbed it before hitting the floor. And she remember looking at me, because she didn't obviously realise I was sat in the car, could see everything. And then she threw it over her shoulder. Then she carries on walking, and I heard this roaring noise, and it was this red sports car drove past. And I thought nothing of it. I just thought, all right, you know. So I lit my cigarette, and I was putting my lighter back down in the tray, and I lift my head, and this woman's walking past again, but from the same direction, as if it's a retake. And I thought, oh, she couldn't have got past me, come back. It was literally a second. And I thought to myself, did I imagine that? Did I imagine it? And I thought, okay, I'm waiting for the handbag. And sure enough, it popped off the shoulder. She grabbed it, looked at me, and I just grinned this time. My reaction was different, obviously, from the first time, because I didn't grin. But this time I grinned, and I thought, that's how weird. And I leaned forward to waiting for the red car, and there it comes. You see, now I thought, was there a glitch there in some time thing that went on? And was I just suddenly have this amazing precognitive ability to see what's going to happen?
Yeah, did you have a premonition? But which do you feel it was?
I felt like a glitch. I did not feel like I'd entered into any form of precognitive state. It just felt a glitch, like a record jump.
Yeah.
And I thought, if that is the case, then why have I had that experience? You know, why don't everybody does? I mean, I've heard of other people having little bit of spaces like that, but so is there a mechanism for reality, and does it hiccup sometimes, and do you get these time anomalies? I mean, I had a courier motorcyclist who went on a journey from north all the way to Wales. He had to drive all the way on a motorbike, which had a tachometer, and he got to the location. He signed off on it 12 minutes past 11 at night, so we know what time he got there when he dropped off the package, and then all he has to do is drive back. He told his wife, "Don't stay up. I won't be. I'm not going to be home until about 4 o'clock in the morning, because it's a long drive." But then he thought to himself, "Well, you know what? I'm not going to take the road, the motorway. I'm going to take the more of a scenic route at night." And he went on the country roads because he thought it was a bit nicer. But he looks into the distance as he's going down these country roads. He sees these strange lights in the field. He thought they were combine harvesters, but these things are coming towards him faster than a combine harvester. Two bright amber lights, and they're coming towards him. At some point, he realizes, bloody hell, I stopped, knowing this is no combine harvester. These things coming towards him, and he was like this because they were that bright. The next thing he remembers is pulling up in his drive, seeing the light on. He thought to himself, "I told the missus not to stay up because I'm not going to be home until about 4. Why is she still up?" he looks down. It's not just gone 4 o'clock. He's literally almost 2 hours early. And he's trying to figure out, he doesn't recall the journey from then on.
No.
But the tachometer showed it that he'd done the mileage. But he couldn't have done that mileage because the bike limitations means that he would have had to travel at over 200 miles an hour to reach the destination within the given time. But the bike won't even do that speed. It's not a super bike, just like an old BMW, it'll go to about 90, 85 miles an hour. But the tachometer showed he did the mileage. Now, how's that for a time weirdo? I mean, that is just, I really have no idea how that happened.
Story.
Just, you know, these things get reported, and I have no idea. It's just those high strangeness cases.
That's a great account. Do you want me to get a couple more questions in, Paul?
Have we time to?
I think we'll go.
Let's not forget, providing Steve's okay.
I'm
You
fine,
okay,
mate.
Steve? You all right? Yeah. Let's have a look. Warren Hardcastle. Welcome to the chat, Warren. Steve is a font of knowledge. Now he's stating that as a matter of fact, says Steve.
You know, the only ones that are fonts of knowledge are the ones that are flying these things.
So here's a question from Warren. How does he feel about the materialistic side of the UFO phenomena? Are there real nuts and bolts element in his view? I know you've talked about the...
they're actually both. It's referred to, the UFO phenomenon is a metaphysical phenomenon. And when you get into the worlds of metaphysics, it means that it depends under what state. It's really tricky. Under certain states, it is as solid as a brick house. On another state, it is not. It's apparitional, see-through, it disappears, it manifests, it dematerializes and materializes properties. It is a metaphysical phenomenon, absolutely. Just because it looks to be solid and feels to be solid doesn't mean that on any other state it would change. And it definitely seems to. So, yeah, we have many of those accounts where they're both, you know, I mean, and sometimes they're even, you know, appear to be in our reality, but we might see them, but they're not quite in our reality. So they're in their own kind of space-time bubble where they don't feel the inertias of, I mean, you know, you have all the TCSA, for an example, To the Stars Academy, coming out of all that bloody nonsense about, oh, well, you know, it's the way they traverse, you know, it's they can traverse in space. It's 3 able ways of traversing, and that's in space, underwater, and in the air. Well, if they knew the phenomena, they also know it can go into the ground. It goes into cliffs, it goes into mountains, it goes into volcanoes. If they knew the real phenomena has got a bubble around it so that it does not feel even the inertias of entering the ground. These things I've been seen going into forests, into the ground, into hillsides, into cliffs, into volcanoes. They have no problem being metaphysical in that nature with that spirit kind of bubble around them. They don't feel the inertia of passing through water and things like that. So, you know, we have a whole more area. I know that there's a lot more consistent here than, you know, the traversities, that just the 3 traversities they talk about. I know there's more, but I also know that they also have this the evading of iron, but it's no different. I mean, for an example, I had a sit down meeting with FREE, which is a foundation which Edgar Mitchell put together in Australia. And I talked to some of their researchers about, they wanted to talk to me about the studies of Project Doorway in regarding people who were having kind of contact cases, weren't very happy about them. In fact, most of them usually are not happy about them. And how to bring that suppression, how to subdue that phenomenon. So we started saying about introducing iron. You know, not only iron to the diet, making sure that we eat iron, that sometimes we drink it because, you know, sometimes we just don't have enough iron in content in our body. Because, you know, even the ancients were sacrificing to the gods women during the menstrual cycle because there was less iron in the body, you know, and that's just not by chance, you know. And of course, when we started realizing that in the 1500s, there was farmers bagging iron rods into the fields to look after their stock.
And we're going to touch on that, but yeah.
The horseshoe is nothing to about absolute nonsense about it being a lucky symbol. The horseshoe was developed and to be placed over doors to keep the fate away, to keep the negative entities out of your home. Iron nails were placed around medieval homes in bedrooms to subdued nightmares, evil presences at night. And it goes on and on. I mean, and it's not just England and America. You go to the Middle East, and you've got hematite, which you use to keep the jinn away, and it's got 96% properties of iron.
Unfortunately, Steve, I've got to cut across you here. We are now at our 50p. Meter has disappeared for tonight's show, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right.
And
I think people need to research.
I think there's lots and lots.
Iron. The iron is a real improbable thing that could be used to help in regards to these people are having bad experiences, even paranormal experiences.
Well, I don't know what to say except thank you, Steve.
I know it's okay. I always have to get cut off at the end, but you know what?
Steve,
I always try and get as much information out as I possibly can.
Seriously, you've done that. You're over and above. Thank you very much. I hope you might consider coming back.
Oh, absolutely, guys. Yeah, just let me know. No problem.
Absolutely love speaking to you. Les,
Yeah.
over to you.
Thank you. And I got to thank you too, guys. Thank you, Steve Mera and Paul Sinclair. And back to me. Well, what a great show tonight, folks. Steve Mera, great info, lots of info, 39 years of solid research there behind him. And obviously, we could go on for another 6 hours or 10 hours with all the info that he could elude out there. Right, I've got to say, I'm sorry for the last few questions we didn't get out. And I'm sorry for the last question that we kept till the end that we didn't actually get out either. So, we'll try and pick up with Steve, I'm sure, and it won't be too long before he's back on and we can get them questions to him. So I've got to thank everybody who came into the chat tonight. I've got to thank everybody for the super chat donations. I've got to thank our moderator, Debbie Singleton, tonight. Done a great job, sterling work, and thanks, Debbie, for that. All I can say is, from me, Les, we'll see you next time. Okay.